What's up, guys? Max from Chef Theory Health here. Just wanted to do a quick video on calorie density, reading labels, and building a healthy plate. Some quick tips of mine that I use to just get us in the right direction. Now, I typically don't count calories on a daily basis, but we must all be aware of the concept of calorie density. It can be useful to count calories for a short period of time. Often I'll have clients do that when we're first getting started, just to get a general idea of what their normal caloric intake is of foods and to get a concept of how many calories are in the different foods that they often eat. If you wanted to do that to get started, MyFitnessPal is a nice app that I find pretty easy for calorie counting and putting in recipes and stuff like that. Another useful concept and idea to look at is referred to as our basal metabolic rate, which basically calculates how many calories we're quote unquote burning on a daily basis. There's many online calculators, if you Google it, basal metabolic rate, that can give you a general idea. They ask you a couple of questions: height, weight, sex, activity level, and a couple of things, and they'll spit out something, a number of what they estimate your caloric burn is per day, how many calories you're burning. Now, this is not an exact science, so don't take that number as gospel, but it at least gives us a starting point if somebody's just getting started with this concept of what our caloric intake goal should be. But for the long term, counting calories to me becomes tedious, and it also leads us to hyper focus on just calories and miss some of the bigger picture of what we're missing in our diet and which foods we're failing to bring in when we get so focused on just the calories. So I have a few simple key concepts that I keep in mind that help me skip the tediousness of counting every calorie, but instead take the overall concept of staying in a nice calorie balance that helps us get it done. So let's take a look at those. The first concept we want to look at is calorie density. Now, this chart does a good job showing calorie density, meaning for the same weight of different food products, how many calories does that food product contain? So whether that's, all the way on the left here, we got our veggies, and then fruits, and then we've got whole grains, and followed by some of the processed grains like pastas. We got beans that came before that with the whole grains. And then you have some of your healthy fruits or vegetables that are a little bit higher in fat, like avocado. And then your animal protein lands right there in the middle. And then it really starts to go up from there as you get into your processed breads, your sweets, your dairy products, your processed fast food products, chips, pretzels, cakes, brownies, crackers. We're really getting up in the red there with desserts, chocolate. And then you got some nuts, seeds, butter, and oil really rounding out in a very high calorie density. Now, again, you don't eat the same weight of oil that you might eat in a bowl of brown rice, but this gives you a nice visual of the concept of calorie density. So usually what we're going to try to do naturally is eat a lot of the low calorie density foods on the far left. We're going to stay heavy in the green, into the yellow, and a little bit of orange with our meats. And then the products on the far right, we're going to eat sparingly and less frequently. But one problem is in our standard American diet, we're eating a ton of orange and red products. And so we're just naturally overeating calories in what seems like the same amount of food. It's very easy to eat a huge plate of good protein, complex carbohydrate like quinoa or brown rice, and a ton of veggies. That's just like an overflowing plate. That is less calories than your standard fast food meal, and you'll leave way more satisfied and way more nourished. One key note to keep in mind here, though, there are some healthy foods in the red, like nuts, seeds, nut butters, and oils of any kind, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. Specifically here, like olive oil. It still has a lot of calories, even though it's a healthy food, so we need to use that sparingly. The main point that we take away here is I like to eat until I'm full and satisfied. I make sure to crowd my plate full of foods in the green, and that helps me feel full, satisfied, and also helps me make sure I'm getting all the nutrients I need. So, speaking of which, this is a nice little visual and goes to the second key concept that I keep in mind is how to build a proper plate. And here's a quick guide on it. Really, I start off with saying, hey, a palm-sized portion of protein, a palm-sized portion of complex carbohydrate, and then the rest is veggies. Not your starchy veggies. Those fall more into the complex carbohydrates like your potatoes and yams, but leafy greens, broccoli, cruciferous vegetables, onions, peppers, tomatoes, zucchini, all those kinds of veggies. We'll be diving a lot more into protein and quantity next week, and then we'll follow that with carbohydrates the following week after that. But this is a nice general guide. I've also listed some great condiments or additions listed that are lower in calorie and can add great flavor to round out the dish. Marinara, salsa, green chili, hot sauces like sriracha or Cholula, avocado, spices, herbs, and then your herb pastes like pesto or chimichurri, curries, citruses, lemon, lime, orange, garlic, and ginger, all great additions. Pesto and chimichurri, though, if you're not making them at home, you do have to be careful of what they're adding into them. So just be careful to read labels on condiments to make sure that they're not full of sugars and some of the oils that we don't want. We'll get into that in 2 weeks as far as which oils we do and don't want. Also remember processed carbohydrates. Again, these whole grain carbohydrates are processed carbohydrates like pastas. Dairy and sauces full of the oil and sugar will drive up the calorie density real quick. So those are the ones we want to avoid to just have a nice, easy plate that we don't have to think too hard about and make sure is going to hit our calorie count without even having to do the tedious nature of measuring and counting everything that we're eating. With that being said, though, that leads us to another key concept of learning how to read labels. Now, there are 2 key parts to look at regarding food labels. Here's a quick look at the first section, which is the nutrition facts. Make sure to note the portion size. Even though regulations have worked hard to make the food manufacturers make this a more realistic number, there's still sometimes much less or much smaller of a portion than what we actually can consume. So keep an eye out on what the portion size is to make sure that that's actually what we're eating. Also, noting how many portions are in the entire container is a great way to get a quick idea of the calorie density of that food item. A great example of this is the small tin containers of flavored Diamond brand almonds, like the wasabi, or they got like Smokehouse Barbecue. I love the wasabi ones, but even that small tin container of them is almost 1,000 calories, and I can smash that whole tin in one setting, no problem. So I typically, even though I love them, I steer clear of those tins of almonds because I know I'm going to eat 3, 4, or even 5 portions of what they call a serving size. And I'm probably still going to leave feeling hungry, but even though I consumed what could be a full meal's worth of calories in just a single quote-unquote snack session. So going down the list that we have here, we have calories, fats, carbs, fiber, and then underneath the carbohydrates, they also have sugars and added sugars. And then we got protein after that in bold. As we get closer to the bottom, make note of the protein section there. We'll be counting protein next week. Vitamins usually round out the list at the bottom, which is then followed by the ingredient list. So let's jump over to that guy. On the ingredient list here is the second important section on food labels. We're talking about it on the back of the products. Here we can see many processed foods have a laundry list full of ingredients. Many of these ingredients we can't even recognize or pronounce. As a general rule, the smaller the ingredient list, which means it's a less processed product and in general, a healthier option. Again, that's just a general rule of thumb there. But keep in mind, ingredients are listed in the descending order of how much of that ingredient is in the product. So what is the highest level of volume in that product? In this case, milk chocolate, is the number one ingredient. Means that's the product that's the ingredient that has the most of it in that product. Now, one sneaky move food manufacturers do is to use multiple sources of sugars to knock them down further down on the ingredient list so that they're not listed as the first ingredient. As consumers have become a little bit more savvy to read ingredient labels and try to pick out the sugars, one trick they use is to use multiple different types of sugars, which drives them down lower on the ingredient list, but maintains still the same level of sugar in the product. So what I'll always glance to right away is down under carbohydrates and under total sugars is the added sugars. That's going to just accumulate all of the different types of sugar, whether it's sucrose or glucose or corn syrup or rice syrup or any other syrups or sugars they throw in there. Sometimes they'll use 4 or 5 different types of sugars to just make them not stand out at the top of the list. Just look for the added sugars. Now you can see on this product right here, 16 grams of added sugar is in one serving size. 16 grams is equal to about 2 tablespoons of table sugar there. A 12-ounce soda contains almost double that much. So that's almost a 1/4 cup of sugar in one soda. And I just point this out as the first and easiest place people overconsume calories is in their beverages. Soda, and even though juice is labeled as a health food, our fruit juices are high in sugar. Even if they don't have added sugar, they're a high sugar product. Also, sorry to say, our tasty beers also are typically a higher calorie beverage. So we just want to keep that in mind as we're enjoying those guys. All right. So in conclusion, we want to stick to whole foods as a safe way to naturally control calorie density without having to be tediously counting them. A palm-sized portion of protein, palm-sized portion of complex carbohydrates, and then filling the rest of the plate with veggies is a great, easy way to build the plate. I use fruits and berries as snack foods, limiting to 1 serving of each per day. We need to make sure we learn how to read labels on the back of the packaged food products, and also be sure to be aware of misleading labels on the front of packaged foods. Every diet trend that gets labeled as a health food, whether it's keto or paleo or plant-based or low-fat, the food manufacturers are smart. They see people gravitating towards those diets as a quick fix, and they'll slap those labels on the front of the packaged foods, even if they're not truly a healthy food. So just steer clear of packaged products and processed food in general. That's a main theme of this entire challenge that we're doing for these 6 weeks, guys. We're slowly build towards it towards the end, but this is going to build a foundation for success for us, sticking to whole foods, learning how to build a healthy plate, learning how to read labels and be conscious of calories and calorie density. We'll follow that up with some nutrient density as we go over the next couple of weeks. So good luck to everybody. Thanks for listening, and let's get her done.